Hey everybody, it's the Bald Man once again. This time we are going to be talking about fiscal policy, both expansionary and contractionary, and we're going to combine the multipliers with fiscal policy to try to fix an economy that is in a recession or is overextended. But before we get there, we have to establish what fiscal policy actually is. So fiscal policy consists of the powers that government has at its disposal to try to tame, manage the economy. And in this case, the two tools that government has at its disposal is spending and taxes. These are the only two things government has at its disposal to try to fix an economy one way or the other. Now, how would they use spending and taxes to fix the economy? Depends on what they want to happen with the economy. If the economy is in a recession, they want the economy to grow, they will implement expansionary fiscal policy. And since we want the economy to keep growing, to start growing once again in a recessionary economy, we could expand expansionary fiscal policy principles to this, and we can increase our government spending and, or sometimes they do both, decrease taxes. Now, why does this help? Well, government spending is a component of aggregate demand. And remember, aggregate demand is equal to GDP. So if it's consumer spending or gross business investment or government spending or net exports, any of these things will help the economy grow. So this is why we are increasing our government spending here in order to grow our economy. Now, what about taxes? We don't seem to find that in our GDP formula here, which is actually the same thing as aggregate demand, if you remember our lessons from yesterday. Well, if the government taxes us more or less, that means we're going to have more or less money to spend ourselves, and that affects consumer spending. And if you remember, consumer spending drives 67% of our economy, which is worth trillions of dollars, guys. So consumer spending is a great big part of that, and by messing with taxes, they can help control our GDP. So this is what they would try to do if the economy was in a recession. But what if it was overheated? What if it's overextended? Unemployment is too low, prices are climbing too fast, we want to slow things down. Well, in that case, we need to implement contractionary fiscal policy. And again, it's just government spending and taxes again. But this time, we want to take money out of the economy. And how would we take money out of the economy? We would do it by decreasing our government spending and or increasing our taxes. Right? The government spends less money, so our GDP would start to decline, or they could take more money from us, from our pockets. What does that mean? It means we have less money to spend. That's less money we can inject into the economy. Economic activity slows down. Price levels start to come back down. Inflation starts to get under control. So if the economy is overheated, unemployment is too low, they will implement contractionary fiscal policy. And if the economy is in a recession, they will implement expansionary fiscal policy. Why is this important, and how are we going to combine this with our knowledge of the multiplier effect? I'm glad you guys asked. Let's find out. So here we're looking at an economy that is in a recession. Currently, we have picked up $100 billion in tax receipts, but we need to pick up 150. We're $50 billion short. we have this recessionary gap of $50 billion that we need to spend in order to fulfill our obligations, right? Our budgetary obligations. The government budgeted for $150 billion in spending, but they've only collected $100 billion in taxes. We're short by $50 billion. How are we going to get the rest of the money? All right. Well, let's take a look at this, right? If our marginal propensity to consume is 0.8, how should government change spending to close the gap? The first thing we need to do here, guys, is we need to find the multiplier. And the multiplier formula, once again, is 1 over MPS, which means our multiplier is actually 1 over 0.2. How do I know it's 0.2? Because MPC is 0.8, so MPC plus MPS has to equal to 1. 0.8 plus 0.2 will equal to 1, so I know I am correct. I also know we do not like decimals inside fractions, so I'm going to convert this into a fraction. It's going to be 1 over 1/5, which means my multiplier is 5. Now, I'm going to take this number. I know we call it a multiplier, and we will be using it in the future to multiply, but for now, we're going to use our multiplier to divide. We have a shortage of $50 billion in our budget. If we divide 50 by 5, we get 10. So the question is, how should government change spending to close the gap? And the answer is not 10, guys. This is not math class, this is macroeconomics. The answer here is the government should increase spending by $10 billion in order to close the gap. So if the government spends this $10 billion, we will create enough economic activity to account for an additional $40 billion being circulated in our economy, and that will then bring us to equilibrium where we want to be. Why do we want to be here? Well, this is full employment. Unemployment was really high at point A here, but if we move to point B, we're right at full employment. People are now have jobs. Yeah, sure, prices are a little bit higher now, but everybody, well, not everybody, but people who are unemployed and looking for work can now find work. All right, so this is working with the spending multiplier. Now let's try one with the tax multiplier. Here we can see an economy that is overextended. Our government budgeted for $100 billion in spending, but we picked up $160 billion in taxes. We have too much money. The economy is overextended. Unemployment is too low. Inflation is going to be running rampant anytime soon. So we want to control it before it gets to be a problem. So what can the government do? Here in this case, guys, we're not going to implement expansionary fiscal policy because the economy is already too large. What we want to do is we want to implement contractionary fiscal policy. And if we remember from our first page here, contractionary means we can either decrease spending or increase taxes. But the question is asking about taxes, right? How should government change taxes? So we know that we are going to have to increase taxes. The question is, by how much? So again, the first thing we need to find is our multiplier. The multiplier is going to be MPS. I'm sorry, not MPS again. I'm sorry, I keep making that mistake. It's going to be MPC over MPS. And in this case, we said our MPC is 0.75. So that must mean my MPS is 0.25. How do I know? Because 0.75 plus 0.25 will give me 1. It's 0.75 over 0.25 will give me a multiplier of 3. I have a budget surplus. This is not a deficit, right? I have a surplus of $60 billion too much. We want to not have that. So what are we going to do? We're going to use our multiplier, which is 3. We're going to divide 60 by 3, and the answer we're going to get is 20. But once again, that's not the answer, guys. This is math. This is macroeconomics. The question was, how should government change taxes to close the gap? So in this case, we can say, I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting the bell to go off there, but we can safely say that the government needs to increase taxes by 20 billion in order to close the gap. If we just take this $20 billion out of the economy, $40 billion extra of economic activity will disappear, and we will then come back to equilibrium, which is where we want to be. We will see a reduction in our price level. Our unemployment rate will also decrease, but it'll go to our natural rate of unemployment, which is, again, 5%. And this is how the government uses the multiplier effect as well as fiscal policy to try to fix economies that are either in a recession or overextended. Once again, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to send me messages on Remind or drop them below in the comments, and I will talk to you later.